Tokyo is a complex city. It gives travelers a hard time by having them lose track of their whereabouts. Streets are not drawn in grids like New York, nor in concentric circles like Paris. The main reason is simple. The entire city of Tokyo still exists on top of a fortress called Edo Castle. About 400 years ago lived a man called Tokugawa Ieyasu. He is known as the model for Lord Toranaga, the main character of the show Shogun. He was a real shogun and the founder of the Tokugawa Shogunate. It was Tokugawa Ieyasu who built Edo Castle as the headquarters of his shogunate. Lord Toranaga was depicted as the mastermind samurai, but with a close look into the complexity of Edo Castle, you may realize the depth of strategic mind behind. The real Toranaga Ieyasu was wiser by far, even frightening. Generally, castles have three purposes: a fortress for defense, a government for administration, and a symbol of power and authority. Let's look at them one by one. First, the obvious one. Edo Castle as a stronghold of war. Its purpose is to defend against attacking enemies. Walls and moats are for stopping enemy forces' attacks. But Japanese castles do more than just this. They are built to guide the enemy army into confusion. Edo Castle is full of these kinds of traps. Pathways are drawn so you cannot go straight. Sometimes turn at right angles. Of course, paths don't necessarily lead anywhere. There are forks in the road and there are dead ends. Yes, they create a maze. Those paths are narrow, so even if there is a path forward, the momentum of the attackers is weakened. Sometimes the end of a narrow path opens up into a wide space. In this box-shaped space, the enemy piles up. Aiming at that spot, attacks are launched from the sides and from above. This design begins with the construction of the foundation. First, the land is reshaped to create the overall base. Slopes are reinforced by embedding stones on the surface. Walls and defensive structures are built on top of the stone. This forms the path. When water flows into the path, it becomes a moat. As for walls, the higher they are, the less chance the enemy climbs them. The walls of Edo Castle are incredibly high. The moats of Edo Castle are also extremely wide. The purpose isn't just to remove the option of crossing, but also to nullify the range of firearms at the time. Yes, you can see the tactical philosophy, controlled chaos. No wonder the city sitting on top is complicated. But the story has just begun. Looking beyond the military makes Edo Castle even more dreadful. In the first place, who built Edo Castle? Tokugawa Ieyasu and the Tokugawa Shogunate were hardly involved in the actual work. At the time of construction, hundreds of years of civil war had just ended. Tokugawa Ieyasu was the final victor and brought Japan back to unification. Feudal lords all over Japan, known as daimyo, submitted to him. But those lords kept a large part of their power and independence, so all of those lords remained as potential enemies. Controlling the lords was a major task for Ieyasu and the shogunate. One measure was to order them to build the Edo Castle. Doing this had many positive outcomes. First, it tested their loyalty to the Tokugawa shogunate. Would they obey, or would they protest? It was an obvious light to reveal friend or foe. Second, it showed off authority. Once they listened to the order, the daimyo were assigned sections and duties. To express loyalty, they competed with one another. Daimyo would see another daimyo next to him doing their absolute best for the Tokugawa order. The authority of the one giving the orders naturally increased. Third, cutting-edge technology was gathered. As a result of the competition, Edo Castle was built to reflect the highest standard of castle-building technology in Japan. The technique of mazes, such as the wide space at the end of the path mentioned earlier, was among them. The stone walls were built by master castle builders. It literally was the strongest castle of them all. And fourth, it widened the power gap between the Tokugawa shogunate and the local daimyo. Castle building requires massive amounts of materials. They had to gather wood and stone, process it, transport it, and assemble it. Who paid for all this? The daimyo themselves. On the stones of Edo Castle, the engraved seals of the daimyo who handled them still remain. The daimyo even competed over the quality of those stones. Sometimes, a noticeably huge stone is placed around an important gate. This has a defensive meaning, but the effect of showing authority is even greater. That huge stone directly represents the authority of the Tokugawa shogunate. With just one order to construct the Edo Castle and have the daimyos share the task, Ieyasu not only broke the enemy's will to oppose, but also forged the best castle at the time, and even took away the budget that could have had them even start a war. This strategy, killing 2, even 3 birds with one stone, military, political, and and economic, seems to be the pattern of the Tokugawa shogunate's rule. The moat mentioned earlier also has an interesting design. Usually the moats of a powerful fortress are in concentric circles, but Edo Castle is different. It draws a spiral. You can clearly see this on a map of Edo, remaining even in modern Tokyo. The moat starts from the center of Edo Castle, draws a clockwise spiral, and joins the Sumida River in the northeast. What does this mean? During war, bridges are designed to be dropped, and then the massive moat remains as a powerful defensive line. With concentric circles, the plan ends here. But a spiral means a lot more, and that's in peacetime. With concentric moats, you cannot move between the moats. But with a spiral, all the moats are connected. In peacetime, this spiral moat functioned as a single waterway connecting the entire city, or a huge canal system. The moat flows through the Sumida River into Tokyo Bay. This means that all goods shipped from sea were directly distributed to every corner of the city on boats. The town of Asakusa is right at the intersection of the Sumida River and the moat of Edo Castle. Goods from sea changed cargo here. It made Asakusa a very busy town. And similar things happened all over the city. The overall wealth the spiral moat brought to Edo and the shogunate is immeasurable. I spoke about the local daimyo, but what burdened them was not just construction work. In the longer term, they were enforced the policy to move between their own local territory and Edo every other year. Their wives and children were permanently stationed in Edo. The purpose was to keep hostages so the lords would think twice about rebellion. The daimyo themselves were allowed to come and see their families in alternating years, but the cost of that travel was enormous. Daimyo, the samurai lords, would never travel alone. They would bring along not only his security guards, but his palace staff, also his bureaucrats. Remember, the order was every other year. They are going to stay in Edo for a year. This was a full-scale relocation of the local daimyo government. Happening every year. Just imagine the cost of such endeavors. Sometimes it reached half their annual budget. By the way, the thinner the relationship a daimyo had with the Shogun family, although granted a large territory, they were always placed in a faraway region. Naturally, to make it harder to attack, but also to make sure they spend a lot more on this relocation. It gets even better. This system not only weakened daimyos, but also created a huge consumer market in Edo. The daimyos of Japan were often called the 300 lords, meaning half of those daimyo, along with their subjects, were staying in the city of Edo at any given time. None of them was among the labor class, but pure consumers, and on the ruling, rich side. Just imagine how much money was dropped into Edo. So yes, Edo was indeed a device to weaken the enemy and strengthen the shogun. Was Edo Castle the strongest? Yes, indeed, military speaking, but that's not all. It was the strongest with all aspects combined: military, political, and economic. And as a result of all this, for the enemy, fighting was not even an option. The strongest Edo castle never fought a battle. A castle that does not fight. That was the ultimate victory. At the beginning, I mentioned that the true shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu, is far more than the fiction, Lord Toranaga. Master strategist is merely half the story. It is the height of his vision, seeing the peace beyond ending the war. What the Edo Castle lacks speaks 1,000 words. For travelers, compared to Osaka Castle or Himeji Castle, Edo Castle isn't so popular. The reason is simple: there is no Tenshu, the gorgeous keep tower that often represents the castle. In the shogun's home, in the capital of Japan, there is no tower. But why? Initially, when it was first built, there surely was a huge one. But after several fires and earthquakes, it was brought down, and eventually never rebuilt. But why? Simply, it wasn't needed anymore. Do you remember the 3 purposes of castles? Yes. A fortress of defense, a government for administration, a symbol of authority. The military function of the fortress was realized by the land zoning, stone walls, and moats. The lords conducted government duties and spent their private lives in the palaces inside. The Tenshu, the keep tower, functioned as the last one, the symbol. But Edo Castle doesn't have it. Its absence speaks eloquently. The city and nation that Ieyasu built around Edo Castle were so strong that they didn't even need a symbol to remind people of his power. This was what he was seeing, and what he formulated into Edo Castle. So who frightens you more, Lord Toranaga or the real shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu?